Welcome to The Bold Blueprint, a podcast for modern educators who dare to think differently. Here we explore the intersection of education and leadership, diving into bold strategies, innovative teaching, and the mindset shifts that drive real impact. Whether you're in the classroom, leading a team, or shaping the future of education, this is your space to learn, grow, and lead with confidence.
All right, I'm always bad with introductions and endings, but hi everyone, and welcome back to the Bold Blueprint. The Bold Blueprint for Modern Educators. Usually, I have my co-host Jamie with me, and he is the one that is absolutely brilliant at leading all that for me. But he can't make it today, and things happen each side, whether it's work or personal. So we'll make sure we keep our podcast going, so we keep them out, getting them out to you all. So I'm Barbi, and as mentioned, I usually have Jamie. He can't make it, and so it's just me holding the mic solo, and he sends his best and was really looking forward to this conversation but couldn't make it at the last minute. And we're still going to bring the same honesty, the reflection, and slightly disruptive energy, depending where our conversation goes. You've come to expect from us, just with one less voice in the room. Although I do talk a lot, so I'm sure I'll make up for it. That said, I'm joined by someone whose voice is more than enough to carry this episode, surely, too. That's Declan Edwards, longtime follower on my end, and he's the founder of the Be Happiness College, and a longtime advocate for emotional wellbeing, leadership with heart, and challenging the way we think about happiness in systems like education and care. So that's why I invited him on. So as mentioned before, I've followed Declan for quite a while. I actually don't know how I first came. I do know how I first came across you, actually. It's your original podcast.
There you go. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, what a blast from the
And
past.
that's what led me to your LinkedIn. I was just thinking, and then because I connected with you on LinkedIn, it led me naturally to the people you engage with. It's like the people in your
I
circle.
believe Tani and Phil and this, some good people. They're doing really good and meaningful work.
Shelley. Yeah, and then even there's someone in our profession, I'm going to say hi, Pam, if you're listening. She used to babysit, I think, Shelley, she said. So,
Wow.
like, whether she's friends with her mum, like, there's just this whole weird connection of everyone up there. But I'm glad that those things happen. Just hearing your podcast one day then leads to this type of work and, I guess, conversations, important conversations as well. So I guess on our end, I told you I'm bad at the intro, so let's get into it. We did speak briefly a bit off air, but also I'm talking all this way. I wanted to give Declan a chance actually to say hi to everyone. Do you want to say anything about yourself? How did I go with my intro of you as well? I'm really always self-conscious in when you introduce someone of like, are they okay with it? Did I get it?
It is a new experience for me. I must say, a lot of the shows I appear on, they're like, oh, we'll do the intro and outro afterwards. And I think because of what you said, where it can be a little bit like nerve-wracking and intimidating doing it in front of the person. But I think you covered the main points. Obviously, I'm a happiness researcher. I've dedicated my life to understanding the skills and science of happiness. And it's nice to hear that. I didn't know that. That's news to me that we first connected through my old podcast that's just been relaunched in the last month as How to Be Happy. So from one podcast to another, I'm glad to be here. I'm excited for this conversation.
What was the original one called?
Be You with Declan Edwards, I believe, was the original name of it. And it's now called How to Be Happy. And we do weekly episodes on the skills and science of happiness, and it alternates each episode between personal happiness skills, and then the next week we do professional happiness skills, so more like happiness in the workplace and organizational setting. It's a nice blend between the two of those.
Oh, that's great. And I think with what we do, although this podcast, so I have had different people reach out who have listened predominantly because of Jamie, co-host, and my background where early learning or out of school hours care a bulk of ours, or primary. I've had even parents actually say they've listened to it for certain things. And even though I was an educator for 20 years, parent hat on, it's like I have no idea. That's all gone out the window, especially boundaries and routines and anything behaviour related with your so it's good to hear we've got a good cross section. And I feel like even if we talk in the context of whether it's a early learning service or not, I think often people listening can still see it for how it might be relevant in their own world, is what we keep kind of hearing on the feedback, which is great to hear. I like it when I came across your first podcast. There must be something in that. I was searching, and one of your episodes must have had something in it, and it just led me down that track on this. So again, we've invited Declan on. For me, well, really, actually, it was your shout out on LinkedIn.
Yes.
To see how many what I can't remember if the challenge was to see how many you could
It
do,
wasn't. It turned into that very quickly. Yeah, gee whiz.
In a 2-week period.
Yeah, so basically for the listeners, I'm in doing what I now lovingly call my podcast interview marathon of 2025. A couple of weeks ago, I sat down and I looked at my calendar and went, I have a little bit of spare room in my calendar in the lead up to paternity leave. My wife and I are expecting our first child. We're going to be parents literally within the next few days. Is looking likely. Yeah, the due date is the 8th of June and we're recording this on the 4th. So could literally be any moment now. And I went, I'll just throw it up on LinkedIn and see what happens. I went, hey, look, I'm predicting that for the foreseeable future, I'm not going to be doing too many podcast interviews. I love speaking on podcasts because of how unfiltered and unscripted they are. I think they're a really humanized, organic way to teach the skills and science of happiness. So if you've followed me for a while and you've been thinking of bringing the skills and science of happiness to your show, send me a message. My commitment is I will say yes to every single podcast request that comes through within the next 2-week period. And I thought, being honest with you, Barbi, I thought I'd get maybe 3 to 5 people at most, like 3 to 5 podcasts I'd appear on. I ended up getting over, I think it was 16, 17 requests at the end. It looks like we're going to squeeze 14 of them in 5 different countries with a combined reach of over 10,000 people listening to the conversations. So when we talk about the ripple effect of happiness and my belief that the more people who learn about the skills and science of happiness, the better the world becomes. It's been a really cool challenge to take on. I will say it is something that I'll be mindful about in future because it added a lot to my calendar very quickly. But I'm glad to be here. We're past the halfway mark. I think I've only got about 4 more to go this week, and then I'm on paternity leave.
And then you also I don't know if this is the happiness side and everything you embody, but you failed to mention you got sick in there. Like you've even had to
True, yeah.
But
we had a little reschedule. We did some
it.
juggling of the calendar to fit in all these interviews and conversations, and then I was struck down by a severe case of the man flu. And was in bed for a day, and so we had a little rejuggle, and this is one of the shows that thankfully we were able to sort of move around and get still booked in, but thankfully everyone was very accommodating. We were able to make it work.
Oh, well, we appreciate you being here too. Again, this is where Jamie, co-host, is great. Also, I think we're not as refinedly polished on purpose because I get sidetracked all over the show. But that's what made me a great educator. 150 kids all asking you something at once. You can follow that one thing at once. Not as great following, but congratulations. I knew you were expecting, but I didn't realize it was this soon, like literally days or any moment now. That's great, exciting news. So you could be one of the parents coming back to listen later.
Literally, yes, could be.
like what I was talking about before. Yeah, it's a very, very exciting chapter. Sleep now whilst you can. Well, I guess so in education and care, I think for most educators or teachers or anyone working in the profession, we see emotional labour as a part of the job, especially as quite an empathetic profession. Usually that caring professions tend to attract them. But we also can often see that emotional support is rarely there. Say it might be just so busy because you're always on the children's need. It could be there, but you're all both on other people's needs that support may not be there, or it just may not be there in general from the employer, organisation, leader, and so forth. So we wanted to kind of have, the idea was a real conversation about why educator wellbeing is central, and I thought a link to child safety. So I don't think many people may have thought of it in that lens, or could have, apologies, and not really separate from it, because a big thing I'm passionate on is child safeguarding. It's like, I think I worked with children for so long because it's like I'm not stuck as a child, but stuck as a child in a sense of, even when I was in a service, their needs were always kind of top of mind for myself, and how they're feeling and experiencing their day and then their emotions through it, especially with they're still developing and regulation and things like that. So I was pretty interested in how kind of figuring out how educator wellbeing is central to that child safety aspect. And I find with your work, Declan, you cut through the fluff around self-care, and instead you speak of emotional culture, leadership, and systematic well-being, and that's kind of like exactly the kind of disruption I think our sector needs. I often find people external that haven't worked in our profession have really great ideas. Or last episode we just released yesterday, we had Tani on, actually it was last week, but she said something, and I think for her it was just so simple about how someone might onboard an educator or someone on their team, and she just mentioned something about gamifying it. And Jamie, the co-host, and my face were like, what? Like, we had never thought about it, even though we work with children. Games is a part of our DNA, basically. But because she's external to the profession and sees so many different things, there's often lots of things like that. Same with yourself. You're external from the profession, but you see a lot within it as well, and do work with a lot of organisations. I always feel like there's so much we can learn. And I guess what brought there's my sidetrack, back to the educator wellbeing and child safety component, kind of what brought that up. And I don't always like using what's been in the media much, but sometimes things just happen and we do talk about it. And there have been recent events, and I was briefing Declan a bit before this, of that kind of shook our profession in the early learning community, especially around the sense of safety and trust. There was viral footage of a kind of harmful educator behaviour, I guess is the most polite way to put it on here. And I guess I thought it could be time to kind of ask a necessary question on that, like what kind of emotional environment, I wrote this down because I'm really bad at it. I was talking to Declan before and I'm saying it. What kind of emotional environment allows that kind of harm to go unchecked, and how do we prevent it? Because I was thinking when I saw this, not TikTok, this shows how old I am because I don't use TikTok or the other one, Snapchat video. What was like going through, like how were they feeling as a person to be doing that in the first place, was kind of a thought I had. Like, you also think what's going through their mind as a parent. You're like, what the and then that's why I thought this would be a good episode to focus, especially with Declan and your kind of area of expertise and knowledge and the happiness side of things. Sorry if I've been going for so long there, but I guess what role does educator happiness, support, and emotional safety play in protecting children and kind of transforming the sector? I think there's a lot in that, probably as a whole. And I think sometimes it is just like dissecting all that. And I was thinking we could even explore it. I always find with podcasts, you might start off thinking you're going to talk about A, B, C, but you end up talking about X, Y, Z. It could even be sometimes that burnout isn't just personal. It can be a system failure that sometimes, unfortunately, can lead. Not saying it's a cause or a reason for that, but that can lead to that, or why those certain checks weren't in place. Like it could be someone's not as present as usual to do those check-ins, or performance managing, or other things, or setting a good role modeling to let things like that escalate. How emotional fluency supports safer, more responsive care, and why leaders, as mentioned before, must kind of model and embed well-being, not just promote it. If they're not present, it's hard to kind of role model it to others, and what collective well-being could look like in education and care settings. So sorry if that's a mouthful.
I'm not sure I'm going to be able to answer all the questions immediately and straight away, but I will come back to the first question that you asked there, which is, what role does well-being and support and happiness in an organizational setting have to do? Like, what role does that have when it comes to child safety? And whilst I won't answer it specifically in relation to child safety, because it's not my area of expertise, it's not, as you said, I'm not in the industry myself, but what I can speak to that I think aligns to it is something that we know from the research on happiness, which is the prosocial impact of happiness. And what that means is when people feel well, generally, when they feel happy and fulfilled, and when they're given the support and resources they need to thrive and to flourish and to show up as their best selves, they naturally tend to do good things towards others. There's a good conclusion from the literature that is when people feel good, they want to do good. It spreads this ripple effect, this contagion effect of happiness that impacts everyone around us, our partners, our family, our friends, our community, our colleagues. When we learn the skills and signs of happiness, we're better able to make that positive ripple effect spread. And so in relation to the video that you mentioned, I haven't seen the video myself, but whenever it comes to workplaces coming to me and going, hey, how do you describe bad human behavior? How do you make sense of bad human behavior through the lens of positive psychology and happiness? I go, well, first and foremost, I think about the prosocial effect, and I go, these people are obviously not feeling their best self in order to do that, because we know that when people feel their best self, they take good action. I would not call this good action. So we need to look at that. We also need to look at, I firmly believe, and look, maybe this is naive and a bit too optimistic, but I've come to firmly believe that people have positive intent. It's just sometimes they have terrible strategies for meeting that intent. Right. And so in this, I don't know what was happening for these people in this particular case, but for example, in workplaces, sometimes I've seen the positive intent is I want to be admired and respected by my teammates and colleagues. My way of meeting that positive intent and trying to get that respect and admiration is by partaking in workplace bullying towards someone. Now, that's a terrible strategy for a positive intention, right? And so when we can try to meet people, even when they're displaying behaviors that we don't like or agree with, when we can try to meet them with that compassion and that humanistic curiosity of going, what is the positive intent here? What are we trying to achieve? Then my hope is we can then go, well, hang on, there is another way to help these people reach that intent. Because otherwise what happens is we demonize, we stigmatize, we judge. And I've just found over the last 10 years of doing this work, if we meet people with judgment, it very rarely leads to positive outcomes. Whereas if we can meet people with compassion and curiosity, we open opportunity for positive outcome. Doesn't guarantee it, but it makes it more likely. I'd answer that first.
Yeah. No, you did really well. You may say you're not in the lens of an educator or someone working in the service, but how you even worded before, like I said, I handwrite. I don't know why I've always just handwritten notes, even though typing's quicker. But about the optimistic side, the positive intent, and your examples are really good there of wanting to be liked by everyone or stuff. And then the terrible strategies, e.g. workplace bullying. I don't know if anyone's dissected anything like that video of being even something like that, not necessarily workplace bullying to another colleague, but how that went down could have been something of wants to be liked, wants to be within this group, may have started off as nothing, somehow has escalated. And yeah, it's just terrible strategies on that side of it. Because I think we see the end result. It's like that dissecting how you got to that end result in the first place. And instead of that's a bad person or anything like that, like, yes, a bad thing we saw happen. And most people in our profession too, and I'm like you, I like to think everyone, regardless of our profession, is great. Even if anyone says they don't like someone or they find someone, what's the word? Arrogant. I don't care. I like if someone comes across that because they're not pretending. Like, if that's them, that's them. I like if you come across everyone and they're all just the same, as you're just not getting the genuine person, I find, on that side. And I guess if they come across pretty blunt and arrogant, you know how to then work with them as well. It's not like you're not really second guessing that. But that's sidetrack on that one. But I think, yeah, and also same with when you said about the when people feel good, they want to do good. And when they're not feeling good about themselves, that's when it can lead to things like this. I think even for people not involved with this, when people feel good, they want to do good, plays a part in the sense of that leadership. Because leadership that I'm aware of, say scenarios, they're not involved with it. But if the leadership's not feeling good either, they're not necessarily going to engage in the best way to help minimize this and put in that good role modeling to start. And there's so many little knock-ons, I think, of how these type of things unfortunately can eventuate. And with the, I guess, today's day and age too of digital, it's like we've got more access as the public to also then see these things we probably haven't seen before, like workplace issues that there's just no one recording it compared to now, and especially in such a public way. Yeah, I still think so. I wrote like a page and a half when you were talking before too on that side. I think you covered that really well of how you dissected it. I know from a leader perspective, it can be tough when you're in it to even think of it that way. Even if you're feeling good about yourself, I feel like, especially when I was the leader of a large service, I what was it called? I used to kind of be known for PMA, positive mental attitude, and like that's what I kind of used to have with whatever I bought, especially with into a service, because I was quite conscious of no matter what was going on in my world, you're stepping almost into the child's world, into the service, and especially with young other staff that were working there. So it was almost like that, not pretending things aren't happening or the leaving. I don't always like this expression, leaving it at the door, but I was really mindful of that energy I might have, even though you're not saying anything, but what that might then that knock on to children, because I know they pick up quite well on energy, whether you're approachable or giving short answers and all that. On that happiness side can play a big part onto the to the children in your care. On that, I feel like I'm just rambling now. Sorry. Oh man, this is what when I need Jamie who helps intercept my rambling on this. So I know we spoke before about, well, I mentioned briefly, I guess, what collective wellbeing could look like in an education and care setting. I know you haven't worked in one, but you've worked or spoken with or to a lot of services. I also know I know I said I found you on a podcast, but I think you've spoken at a conference maybe a while ago, Forsh.
Yeah.
I feel like a long time ago, that maybe where I'm picking up that, but my pre-two kids brain had somehow filed that away. So I know you have a connection there, or whether there's any thoughts on that, what collective wellbeing could look like in an education and care setting. And this is mindful that also we're looking after other people at the same time. Like it's not sitting at a computer typing, like there's so many other different things going on at once, the emotions of the young people, even families coming in, tired mums like me talking at a service, but perhaps that collective wellbeing lens and how that could look, even if it's an educator listening, because I think everyone forgets that it doesn't matter if you're one person. I still think one person's energy can bring that biggest difference, whether you're a new educator that's just started, trainee, or a director of experience. I think that can still have that kind of knock on in a service. So whether a new educator listening or an experienced educator, on that collective wellbeing side, even easy strategies people might not realise of attempting in these environments or what they're doing. And I'm going to keep talking, aren't I?
I might jump in and save you. I'll jump in on that one. So like, I might expand it rather than being about collective well-being. I'll talk about collective happiness. And the reason I say that's an expansion is because part of my master's thesis study into what does happiness look like in an organizational setting? How do we define happiness in workplaces? Well-being was only one of 5 contributors to happiness in workplaces. So I might expand it a little bit and say, what does collective happiness look like in the collective pursuit of happiness, be it in an educator setting or as a parent or, anyone who exists in society where we have an impact on other people. What I'll say to that is, for a long time, we've made the mistake, and I'll put my hand up and say that I used to make this mistake a lot very early on in my career as a happiness researcher. We make the mistake of thinking that happiness is an individualized pursuit and responsibility. We think that our happiness is our responsibility, other people's happiness is their responsibility. And I think we have a whole industry of self-help in some ways to blame for this. Self-help, the dark underbelly of it for the last 30, 40 years is, if you're not happy, it means you're doing something wrong. You need to do better. And this is what you need to improve. Now, look, I still think there is some truth to the saying that our happiness ultimately is our responsibility. It's not up to us to make anyone happy. I can't force people to be happy. I can't, stuff happiness down people's throats. However, I can influence other people's happiness. We know for a fact that we influence each other's happiness. So I now believe, and I shared this in my TED talk I did last year, I believe that happiness starts within us, but it's expanded between us. So we plant the seed inside of us. It's a personal ownership and responsibility there, but we expand happiness collectively and communally. How do we do that? Well, there's so many different ways, but one way that we need to do it is look at how do we strategically influence the happiness of others without burning ourselves out in the process. Right? Without spreading ourselves too thin. And this is something I see a lot in the helper industries, allied health, education, social work, not-for-profits, industries that I love working with because, somewhat selfishly, our professional vision at BU Happiness College is to grow global happiness. I cannot hope to change the happiness of the whole planet on my own directly. It has to come through a ripple effect. And I think the best professions and best industries that are positioned to spread that ripple effect are allied health, social work, education, not for profits, right? Industries that attract professionals who want to give back and help and make a difference. However, what I've noticed by working with these organizations and these professions is there's often an underdevelopment of skills when it comes to how we do what I call healthy selfishness. Now, I'll point out the difference here between traditional selfish and healthy selfish, because I don't want anyone who listens to this conversation having the key takeaway, that guy who studies happiness said I should be more selfish. And then you go out and stuff everyone else. We don't want that. We don't need more of that in life, right? What I will say here is traditional selfishness, which we've all been raised to avoid, we say it's a bad thing, is I will put my happiness first at the detriment of the happiness of those around me. I will literally step on other people's happiness. I will sacrifice other people's happiness for my own happiness. That's not what we want, right? Healthy selfishness is I will prioritize my happiness, not necessarily as the top priority in life, but somewhere up there, somewhere in the top 3. I'll prioritize my own happiness for the benefit of those around me. And what I mean by that, how do we know it's a benefit? Well, fact of the matter is, we know from the research and we know from all the work we've been doing over the last few years, my team and I coaching and consulting and working in this space, that we spoke about before, the prosocial effect of happiness. When people feel good, they do good. I know for a fact I'm a better husband, I'm a better family member, I'm a better partner, I'm a better friend, I will likely be a better parent, I'm a better leader, I'm a better decision maker when I'm happy and well compared to when I'm stressed, burnt out, overwhelmed, and exhausted. Right? When I feel my worst traits come out. We all have it within us, right? And so from that lens, the kindest thing we can do for our loved ones and the greatest impact we can make on those around us, be it kids at school, be it our teammates, be it the parents of the communities that we serve, the kindest thing we can do is to make sure that we're looking after ourselves effectively. That is healthy selfishness. I'm looking after myself and prioritizing my happiness so that I have the capacity, so that I have the energy, so that I have the resources to give back in a way that is much more sustainable. That way I can be more intentional about influencing the happiness of others, about impacting the happiness of others, but doing it in a way that doesn't come at the cost of my own happiness. And that's my hope for a lot of people in the industry and these professions, is that we invest the time and energy and resources into learning those skills of healthy selfishness. Things like sustainable self-care and effective self-care. Things like humanistic leadership in workplaces. Things like burnout preemption and prevention, so we're not just working on burnout recovery. If we learn these skills, we create happier humans. And if we have happier humans, we have better societies.
Yeah, and then the knock-on too, just little humans for everyone in a service. Like I was mentioning before, you just say it so much better than I do on this side. I know in, like you mentioned, those care professions, that it does attract a lot of the empathetic side that can find it hard to put themselves first, tend to put others first. But I was talking to a psychiatrist who told me that those professions also attract the opposite, a lot of narcissists who can fall on that category, that other side, that I guess
the
that
traditional selfishness.
Yeah. They said they seek out that because of whether it's an ego driven or whatever they're looking for. Because say working with young children, you're always needed. You've always thanked. You've always, like, no matter, like, you might just give a child a colouring in and you're thanked. It's like the best thing in the world. And same with like nursing or healthcare and all those. So it's like it's got two sides of it bubbling in there. I was surprised. I only got told that about 2.5 years ago, and I was like, what? No. And then I was like, oh, never thought of it like that. And I think as someone who struggles myself, as doing anything for yourself, and it's like that healthy selfishness versus selfishness, in a service setting, and even as a parent, it's probably even worse because you haven't eaten breakfast, but you're like, nope, I've got to do this for my child first, even though I really need to do this, or even lunch or dinner, or just the time. It's not it disappears, it's just you put their needs first before your own quite often, which isn't always a benefit. And that's but then, because when you said the selfishness side, I wrote not at the detriment, but then that stressed, burnt out, exhausted, I do it myself, in that I can leave myself just running empty, whether it's not enough sleep. I think that's my biggest one. And that's a me responsibility. It's nothing to do with my kids half the time. They are the ones keeping me up half the time, but the rest of the time it's me. It's what I'm doing in my day. It's what I'm eating, down to like even things like caffeine. It's my choice. I used to have a tea, not a coffee drinker, but my caffeine boost was a tea at 6 p.m. and then question why I wasn't sleeping. It's like, oh, maybe it's that. It's nothing to do with actually my children. But that knock-on keeps leading to that stressed and burnout and exhausted. And that's when I find that emotional side, it's not you become something you never thought you would, but I know for me, I had quite a different upbringing, that I'm a helicopter, very smothery mother. Like, yeah, doting on them all the time. But as soon as you fall into that stress, burnt out, exhausted, I notice my fuse is a lot shorter, which I never thought it would be. It never was. This as an educator for 20 years. And it's like, because you're not being healthy, selfish for yourself, it's creeping into how I then present for them. And just things I get irritated with that honestly don't bother me. It's just because you are finding yourself tired or frustrated, or like, and how you react. You may not even be saying anything, but that facial expression you can give a child when you're feeling like that, it's just enough to then set them off. And then I've noticed, if I have 2 children, the oldest is a girl, she's 5. If I get frustrated with her, and again, it may be just your facial expression. You may just think they don't even notice, and you're like, oh, come on, like in your head, but they notice, they pick up on this. And I know that can easily happen in the service too. So this is talking with my parent lens. But then I've also then noticed her being 5 will then often go then do something to her brother. May not be immediately, but it's like this knock on. And I've pointed it out to my husband, James, to then her brother's 3 will then notice her brother go do something to the dog. It's like this weird downward kind of spiral from something that can seem like nothing to say myself, like an eye roller, or like, oh, like getting ready to go in the car, like, come on everyone, why can't you put your shoes on? It's like that language you use, or that facial expression, to then that knock on of that's affected her then happiness as such, to make her then want to trigger her brother almost, or it's almost like get that frustration out on him, which then triggers him to then get his frustration out on the child. Because this I've only probably noticed over the last few months as much. It's like fascinating. I find seeing it so simple, like in front of me in our own home life, and especially with something as small as me just trying to rush them out of the house, not even saying anything bad, maybe just that facial gesture, or a sterner voice, and just that ripple effect it can have. And if that happens in the morning to then what the rest of their day can be like, each and all of them, like what she might be like at school, to what he might be like at school, to his friends, and the poor dog, there's no one else. so he's down there. But yeah, it's being, and I find for me having to be way more mindful of that energy and bringing that facial expression, even regardless of how tired I am, and then also being more mindful of, okay, what am I doing, that healthy selfishness side, to prioritize my happiness. So then that has that ripple down, because I find as the opposite is when I'm coming with them with a more relaxed facial expressions, even your body language, they can feel if you're rushing around and stuff, and way more relaxed, not rushing them. Then that knocks on to her then being way more supportive to her brother, to then him being actually nicer to the dog, patting him rather than pulling his tail. And it's like, I think and I know that's my own family, but that's things that can happen in a workplace, whether in the service or anywhere, or even a friend group. Just that natural transfer of what you're putting out there. I guess that energy,
well, emotions
what
are
you're putting out there.
contagious. Like, we know this. Emotions, there is a contagion effect to emotions. And you're actually reminding me of one of the most common questions I've been asked over 10 years of doing this work, which is, Declan, do you work with children? And can you, how do I teach my child emotional intelligence? How do I teach my child how to manage their mind more effectively? How do I teach my child how to manage their emotions effectively? How do I teach them how to be kinder to themselves and towards others? You know, the amount of parents who come to me and ask, do we work with kids? And every time I've said, no, it's not my area of expertise. It's outside my scope of practice. And look, I'm not a parent yet. I'm becoming a parent soon. But for 10 years now, I've been answering that question with, one thing I can give you as a piece of advice is to ask yourself how much you're role modeling these things yourself, right?
Yeah.
How much are you leading by example? And I've seen so many beautiful examples over the last decade of when parents go, hey, instead of just trying to focus on the happiness skills of my children, I need to focus on my own happiness skills. And they come to the college that I run, to BU Happiness College, and they invest in learning emotional intelligence for themselves. They invest in learning communication skills. They invest in learning how to discover and live in alignment with their values. They invest in learning about boundary setting. They invest in learning about difficult conversations and how to have them. They learn these skills that are correlated with happiness. And what happens is just exactly as you've described, as a byproduct of them learning these skills and role modeling them in the household or at work, the people around them pick up on them. And their kids' behavior starts to change. Their kids start to learn these skills. Their partner learns these skills. Their team at work starts to learn these skills because they started by practicing on self. If there's anyone listening to this who's like, oh, I cannot tell you enough how many times people come to me and they're like, oh, this is all really great. I wish my team would learn it. And I'm like, cool, I agree. But are you doing it? Or they're like, oh, this sounds really great. I wish my teenager would learn it. Cool, I agree. But are you learning it? Like, the only person we have full ownership and responsibility over in our life, again, we can influence the happiness of others. We cannot control it. But you can control and take ownership for your happiness skills. And I promise you, after doing this for over a decade now, if you start on self and you lead by example, good things normally follow.
It's all that, like, I was going to use the word manifestation, but it is that think positive and positive things happen type thing. I do notice a big change in that. And again, it doesn't necessarily mean it's manifestation depending what everyone believes in, but it is that just energy you're putting to, for me, if I didn't reflect on it as me probably being a bit crankier one day and that's what knocked on that behavior, I could have reflected on that as actually it was them. Whereas same with the opposite of noticing the transition of, oh, I've been at a much more grounded energy level, not rushing, no firmer tone, giving them their time, and then noticing they're also, I guess, a lot of people in our profession would just use that behavior side, really improving on that day. I could not notice it was me, but just think it was them and think, oh, maybe they ate a banana for breakfast and their energy levels are nutritionally fine. Because I have to admit, coming into it as a parent, I was always, and I still am, my husband will say, I'm always conscious of what they've eaten, to thinking about that first of what's happening with them, and not as much as thinking what am I giving them in the moment. Just the little subtle things, like I mentioned, facial tone, even if it's something as little as your phone being like your kid asking you and you're like, yeah, like that. And I've just seen also being mindful of what that does to the 5-year-old or 3-year-old looking at you in that moment of even if they just want to tell you something random, like they saw a bird or something. It's just that space for it. And then because I find with me it's just those simple things. And then same within the education space or even in the workplace, working with other educators. We've got educators sometimes. I've had educators that are junior educators, 15 years old. They're still developing, especially brains as in the work environment. Be mindful what our energy brings to them, because I did quickly look up before, because I always forget the word when you're talking about the with parents always asking about if you work with children. That's actually something I don't ask you, because I guess on our end we know children develop just so differently. They're egocentric for a long time. Like as a parent I forget it, but especially when I'm like, why can't you share with your brother, like in my head, and I'm like, hang on, just got a few more years probably. Like it'll get there. I forget that side of it. So you mentioned before you actually get asked a lot if you do work with children or people supporting on that side. I have to admit, my question for you wasn't anything to do with that, probably because we're in that space. It was actually what drew you to happiness work, like in the first place.
Yeah, so for me, I've been fortunate enough to find myself in a career where I cannot think of anything that I'd rather be doing. And that came from, a lot of people meet me and they make the mistake of just assuming oh, this guy seems pretty chipper. Of course he works in happiness research. He's a pretty happy guy. But I spent a lot of my life wrestling with happiness. I spent a lot of my years chasing other people's definition of happiness rather than defining my own. I was really good at being what I now know as a human chameleon. I could be whatever I thought other people wanted me to be. And as a result, I lost connection with myself. And I also just spent a long time wrestling with my relationship with myself. To this day, I still have plenty of moments where I wrestle with self-doubt, imposter syndrome, bit of anxiety. And so being able to manage my mind and emotions was a skill set that I was very fortunate enough to be exposed to relatively early on from great coaches and mentors. And the more I learned from them, the more I went, I wish I learned this earlier. Like I was learning this in my early 20s. So I was like, I wish I learned this in my teenage years. And then where did you guys learn this stuff? Like, why do you know it? Like, where did you get it from? It felt like they had this toolkit for life that I hadn't been exposed to then. And so many of them mentioned positive psychology and acceptance and commitment therapy and mindfulness and all these terms that I was like, okay, there's whole fields of research out there dedicated to how we live better and happier lives. I think that's something I want to learn more about. And very fortunately, it's one of those Steve Jobs quotes of, we can't connect the dots of life looking forward. We can only do it looking backwards. And when I look back, I did an undergrad degree in health science. And then there was a postgraduate program opening in Australia for positive psychology, which is the scientific understanding of happiness. And it was recommended that to go into that postgraduate degree, you had an undergrad in either education, business, or health. And I went, I have a health science degree. I could get into this. And off I went and just fell in love with that field of research. And as I mentioned, I've spent the last 10 years now and predict I'll spend the rest of my life as a lifelong student of learning what it means to live a happy and fulfilling life. And at the same time, running our social enterprise, BU Happiness College, to teach individuals and organizations those skills and science of happiness so that they can also play their part in spreading a ripple effect of happiness into the world.
Yeah. Like you said, it's like you kind of get to a point of where did you all learn this? Like the people that do know it, or say anyone talking to you, it was like, hey, how do you have this? And then just learning from that. I think people being open, especially yourself, you're pretty open just then about how we've felt, even feeling now or in the past. I think that helps for me personally with that true happiness side. I think I've always been known as that person, but whether that's who I was deep down inside is a whole different story, and I didn't realize it either. In my 20s, I was just appreciative of where we live, drive a car, blah blah blah, but never really explored that true happiness side. And it's just great learning along the way as you get older. It's like you're always learning, no matter what age we are. Different ways of doing things or thinking, especially in pending what's going in your world to suit that. And then I've very much loved exploring that side. I know with what we were talking about before too, I wrote it down whilst you're talking. It's almost like that happy educators aren't a luxury for probably early learning or any type of service. It's more of a strategy. It sounds like, same how I was describing with myself to my children, that knock on, it can be the same with happy educators and that knock on within the service, whether you're an employer or another educator or the leader of the service. That whole component, if that's more of a strategy on how you create and keep and maintain that ecosystem, I'm just going to call it a happy educator ecosystem, to suit your team, I feel like that strategy will just have so much knock-on ripple effects to other areas within it as well. We tend to, because we run out of time, we tend to have a question we ask people before they leave, nothing to do with whatever we spoke about. And the last 2 times we've asked this, it's been weird what happens. The question is, what was the first live performance, or if you're not into music, gig or anything like that, you saw or remember seeing?
The first concert I ever went to was Carlos Santana in the Hunter Valley wine region. I went with my mom and my guitar teacher at the time, who was a big blues guitar guy. He said if I wanted to learn guitar, I had to learn blues guitar first, and I'm glad he did that to me. It was also my first experience, and I would have been about 14. It was my first experience of finding out that my mom knew what the smell of weed was, because we were at the concert. I went, what is that smell? And my mom went, that is marijuana. And I went, okay. And then it wasn't until that night after we got back from the concert, I went, how does my mom know that? And I realized that, my mum was born in the 60s and must have had a good time in the 80s and 90s.
And then I said it like that too, because we talked about assumptions in another episode of just assuming people like live music. Not everyone does. It just happened to be something Jamie, co-host, and I had. And then the last two guests, each individually had some random connection with Jimmy Barnes. So they didn't use it as the first show they went to see, but after the one recorded, she went to catch a flight, got an upgrade to business class, happened to be sitting next to Jimmy Barnes. Didn't even realise, though, until she said something smirky to them about, why are you so important? Because I think the air hostess kept helping out. And then same with last week, talking to Tani, we mentioned it, and she said she recently, or not long ago, had actually bumped into Jimmy Barnes and had a photo of it with him. So if he comes up in your world anytime soon, this will be like the 3 from 3 kind of trifecta, random thing coming up on that. But no, I love hearing the live music things. What I like most is seeing the people's face, because they're reminiscing, and it's like, yeah, that side of it. Especially, well, thank you so much. Thank you for bearing with me and solo hosting. I am not a solo hoster at all. I'd rather be a follower, and that's what I love to do. And we'll make sure to share your links, and anything else we'll keep in wherever this is posted, whether it's in Spotify or Apple or on socials. We'll pop that all in there to see people can get in touch with you, because I think people don't realize there's so many just avenues we can go for support, and it's not all on us on our own. I think it's the main thing.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I might pop in there for those who are listening. If you are a podcast listener, which I assume you are because you're listening to one right now, I'd love to invite you over to my podcast, to How to Be Happy. If the skills and science of happiness is something that intrigues you or that you're curious about personally or professionally, come learn about the skills and science of happiness with me on that show. And we've actually just started doing a little social experiment where I've decided to take our entire social media advertising budget and redirect it towards social good. So for everyone who subscribes to the podcast, we're currently taking the money we would have put into social media advertising to land a new podcast subscriber, and we're putting that same amount of money towards preserving a square meter of rainforest. I announced that like 4 days ago, and so far, just in the last 4 days, we've protected over 220 square meters of rainforest. And by the time you're listening to this, we will have hopefully been running that experiment for a few months. So if you want to learn more about the science and skills of happiness, if you want to make a positive impact on the world, come across and subscribe.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll send everyone that way. And that's great. I saw that initiative come up the other day. I love it. It's the same thing of not like one person, you can make a difference, like so much difference too. Well, good luck for the next few days.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
As well, and thank you so much for coming on. I'm always terrible at signing off, but I guess because we do put on YouTube too, it's like, bye everyone. Enjoy. Yeah. Follow us along next time when we have Jamie as well. Thank you so much, Declan. Lovely to have you and chat with you as always. I always leave feeling so good after talking to you, so I appreciate it.
I appreciate that.
Thanks for listening to the Bold Blueprints.
If you'd like to get in touch, you can reach out to us on
elm.net.au or
fireflyhr.com.au.
Bye.
Bye.